service that is a little different from people. We're not just bartenders that you can hire. We also have a portable bar that, as you can see, is rustic looking, as well as stainless steels. So it keeps it very clean and elegant. We also have a acrylic countertop on, and this is just one section. We have a second section with a back bar as well. It's fully operational, has its own power supply, not with a generator or anything like that. And so there's no tripping hazards or anything like that, or extension cables for people to be going through. And it has its own water supply, so we can keep things very clean and hygienic.
Amazing.
We try to create cocktails for all types of events, but our focus is on weddings and corporate events. And we try to create cocktails that are reflective of the happy couple, or so let's say the corporate event wants a special martini night. We would establish what a martini is and then build it up and see where we can go from there.
Love that. Anything that's personalizable, if that's a word, or customizable, unique. I love that. I'm always sort of encouraging my couples to find ways to bring their personalities and the things that they like into their wedding, because that's what sets it apart from every other wedding that they've seen. So love that. Yeah, so I just want to encourage anybody who's listening to feel free to pipe up in the comments if you have any questions at all. We're keeping video and audio off just to help with bandwidth. I'm not a tech person at all, but my understanding is that we'll have less tech issues if we have limited video and audio, but the chat is always open, so feel free to put any questions that you have at any point in there. And I'm just going to, first of all, give you a cheers here. I'm drinking oh, you got something? There we go. I'm drinking a pink grapefruit gin fizz tonight. So cheers, whatever you're drinking with. Cheers to you. Clink. Awesome. And I'm going to let Matthew take it away. So we are creating a couple of really special Caesars tonight.
Yes, we're going to do Canada's national drink, a Caesar. We're going to start with the basic steps of how to create a Caesar. And we're also going to do a little bit of special twist. It's going to be a maple bacon Caesar. So without further ado, I would like everyone to grab their bacon, cut it up into half strips. And then we're going to use that brown sugar and sprinkle that brown sugar onto the bacon. And we're going to temp that brown sugared bacon and put it into the oven for 375 for about 10 to 15 minutes, depending on how crispy you like it personally. And once that's set aside, we can then start to dip it right into the fun of building a Caesar. Whenever you're grabbing a Caesar, typically I use mason jars. I don't know how good the camera angle here. Mason jars. And then I would rim the glass with a little bit of lemon or lime, citrus, because in order to create and establish that stickiness for the celery salt or other rimmers, there needs to be a little bit of wetness to it. When I'm taking my celery salt, I'm actually turning my glass into a circular rotation. That way, and putting the celery salt on the outside of the rim of the glass, as opposed to getting the celery salt inside and getting that grittiness into people's drinks. We'll leave that for the salt and pepper. After that, we're throwing on some ice cubes. Just before we throw in our liquor, because you want to get a nice base going. Get it nice and chilled, so people can enjoy a nice cold beverage and not just something that's going to warm up in 10 minutes in their hand. How's the camera angle? Can you see me, or should it be a little closer?
No, we're great, actually. I have a nice view of what looks like a lovely place to sit down and have a drink on a Friday night.
Oh, absolutely. And wait till we have the fire pit going.
I love it. We're actually building a deck extension right now that's going to have a fire pit. So looking forward to that.
Lovely.
Yeah. That's
the way to spend the nights, honestly. It's just out by the fire and a nice cold beverage.
Love
or
it.
Hot. Whoever knows. So I'm going to take my little jigger here, Measure out 2 ounces because I enjoy a little bit of vodka and a little bit of kick. After that, we're going to apply, sorry?
Sorry, I was going to say, do you have a preference in terms of which vodka you're using, or is it personal preference? Is there one better than the other? I'm not a vodka drinker.
Personally, if I'm going to be mixing it into a nice cocktail per se, like a raspberry vodka soda concept, then I would use a little bit of a higher end vodka. But for now, I just use Polar Ice or Smirnoff, something that's commonly used with and everyone's familiar with, but always open up to different preferences.
Right.
I splash in a little bit of Tabasco, a little bit of Worcestershire as well.
Those lids always stick.
Yeah, they do. That's why I typically just leave the whole bottle open during a main gig. It's easier. As we were mentioning before, sometimes there's lineups at weddings and other events, and you're sitting there for about 10 minutes waiting for a drink, even though there's not that many people. So this is just a way to keep the flow going. And we're going to add our Clamato. I keep it just underneath the rim because ultimately we're going to be stuffing our Caesars with a lot of goodies. Everyone loves a Caesar because it's like a snack.
Exactly.
So we're going to throw in a little bit of salt and pepper that I have strategically hidden behind my sign here for quick access.
Love it.
Got to be creative.
Well, and I'm a fan of a clean looking, aesthetically pleasing bar as well. So it serves the purpose of hiding all of the necessities.
It certainly does. And honestly, having a cleaner bar makes it easier to move around, right? Keeping that flow consistent. You're going to throw in a spicy Caesar bean, as well as the crucial celery stick, always needed to snack on, and the ever needed pickle dipped right into it as well. And we top it off with a nice tasty wedge and a straw to enjoy the beverage, but we don't need to do that because I'm not a big fan of Caesars. I just figured a lot of people enjoy Caesars. It's a common beverage. So why not showcase on how we do it at Handlebars and how we can do a little bit of a simple twist with everyone at home.
Love that. Now, if you were suggesting this as your signature cocktail, for instance, obviously it's a little bit more labor intensive than some. Is it sort of prohibitively labor intensive, or are you, as a well-oiled machine, able to crank them out pretty quickly so that, those times when there's always a lineup at the bar, right? Like right as soon as cocktail hour starts or immediately after you open the bar, after speeches. Yeah. What do you have any suggestions on sort of avoiding the lines, or is the Caesar is it fast enough to make that it's still an awesome choice for a signature drink?
Absolutely. I think it all comes down to how the bartenders want to run it. Personally, I find toppers to be a lot of time consuming when in regards to any beverage. So what I like to do is I prepare prior. I will either toothpick the pickles and the celery stick with the spicy bean or whatever the toppers, maybe even a grilled carrot for a smoky texture inside, right? This is what I mean, how we get very creative with our beverages.
I would have never thought of a smoky carrot actually as a topper, but that's genius.
Yeah, you just put that right on there with the celery. The celery is the staple.
Really is like a salad in a glass.
It really is.
Now, have you seen many Caesar bars done at weddings? Like sort of interactive do-it-yourself kind of ideas?
Sometimes there's the do-it-yourself for some events. Others, it's a separate bar altogether. So with Handlebars, we like to, if we're going to have a Caesar or a time-consuming beverage, like a specialty cocktail that may take a little bit or a few extra steps, we'll separate. As I mentioned before, we have multiple sections to the bar. So we'll try and divert the lineups per se. We won't have one bar, we'll have two or three. That way people then have stations to go to. And it sort of helps us not have any lineups for anybody. There's no inconvenience.
I very much appreciate that, because I know how frustrating it can get for the guests when there's that incredibly long lineup right as the bar is opening for cocktails. I actually did a wedding a couple of years ago where they had several, I think it was 4 very labor intensive signature cocktails, and the line was just not moving. So my team and I were all smart served as well. So we jumped in and we started just carrying around trays of wine and beer to try and get that line to reduce, because it was so crazy. So definitely that's something to think about when you're choosing a signature cocktail, is how to make it efficient. Can you work with a bar service like Matthew, where they're going to, create separate lines, and this is your Caesar bar and this is your everything else bar? I think that's a brilliant idea.
Even like wine or champagne, and you got to get that prepared for toast and so forth. It makes it a little bit easier on us as well, so we're not bashing into one another. There's no product being wasted or spilled, and it ultimately looks a little bit cleaner. This is somebody's special night, special occasion, and it should remain that way.
Absolutely. How many bartenders would you recommend per number of guests?
Typically, we would have 2 for every 50. And then we would build our way up from there, dependent on what type of guests. For example, if it's going to be a lot of young children and parents, then it's sort of half and half, and we can get away with 2, even if it's at like a 60-person or a 70-person. Granted, not in these current times, but that was typically the way to do it. And it was ultimately how strong are the bartenders or the staff that I can acquire for that event. Am I familiar with them, and are they capable of handling 50 plus on their own?
Right. Right. And I definitely think that's a good point about the current situation that we're in, where bar lineups are verboten and we are supposed to be remaining at our seats, and bar service is supposed to happen at your seats. I mean, that's definitely a different kind of complexion than we have seen historically at wedding bars. So we're all starting to navigate that. I don't know if you've had any weddings recently. I have my first wedding of the year tomorrow, which is just bananas. I mean, it's August and we haven't done a wedding. We did a wedding in February and we haven't done a wedding since, which is crazy. So, I mean, everybody's kind of navigating that situation together and trying to figure out what works best. But the suggestion, as I understand it, the recommendation from the health unit currently is that if you are having an event, you are allowed to have your restricted gathering numbers, which is 50 inside or 100 outside, but your guests are meant to remain seated. So serving from the bar to the table is something that we're anticipating seeing.
And it's definitely something that maybe not everyone is used to, like myself. And it's going to be a trial and error process. And sometimes even I'm thankful enough to have a space where I can do a practice event a week or 2 prior. With the staff, and do like a trial and error for any type of event, especially major ones, if we're not all comfortable and it's almost like a new beast for us to take on. And that would be something that I would probably have to implement maybe even twice prior to an event, just per se for myself and for my own staff and their own health and safety.
Right.
We also have face shields and other things that are PPE protective gear for the staff. And not only protect us, but to protect the guests.
Absolutely. And I think that is such a good point that you just brought up about having a trial event on your own time. I think that's so indicative of an upper scale service. I mean, not every bartender is going to do that for you. So I think that that's a really great argument for booking a top end service like Handlebars, because you know that you're going to get that fully sort of established, and they've had all the problems worked out in advance. So yeah, I think that's amazing.
Well, as best as we can, right?
Love it. Okay, are we ready with bacon? Let's talk about bacon.
Now, who doesn't love bacon, right? I may have gone a little bacon crazy and made about 10 strips worth of candied bacon for this one beverage.
Amazing.
But like we both agreed on, can't go wrong with bacon.
Very
so
true.
the principles are going to carry on with the second Caesar, even though it's going to have a maple bacon twist. What we're going to be doing is I've mixed up a little bit of steak spice mix with a little bit of celery salt, and I've done that into a plate that's going to make it easier to rim the mason jar. And like before, as I mentioned, I'm still going to use a lime, but where we're going to get that mapley flavor is not actually going to be from just the bacon. We're actually going to rim the exterior of the mason jar with a little bit of maple syrup.
Oh my goodness. Now, while we're on the topic of rimmer, we were actually talking in one of the workshops this week about combining a tasting bar, like a signature tasting bar, for instance, a Caesar bar, with a favor. And my suggestion was that if you are creative and you're into, developing your own Caesar recipes, or if that's your thing, that you might want to incorporate a custom Caesar rimmer as your favor, and you could display that nicely on your Caesar bar in a cute little jar and send it home with your guests as a favor, which I think is a really creative idea. And obviously you are also a fan of developing different rimmers to go with the flavors in your drink. So do you have any other suggestions of things that would work well as a rimmer?
Any like seasonings that typically you fancy? So like, for example, if you want a little bit of a kick, I've tampered around with something called Slap Your Mama spice. Yeah, it's from like the States. It's from down south, and it has a very potent kick to it. So I don't really need to add Tabasco into the beverage because the rimmer itself does that for you.
Okay.
And I find ways on cutting down on the spiciness. So if I have to get a regular bean, or I have to create the vegetables myself and make my own brine in order to complement it, then that's some way that I would adjust. But yeah, Slap Your Mama spice, I would definitely highly recommend on a chicken rub or even on a Caesar beverage.
Now, is that slap yo mama or is it slap your mama?
Slap yo mama. Like,
yo mama. I love it.
Right? It's just so fun. It's a fun little seasoning.
That's awesome. Okay, so I think I stole your thunder as you were doing the rimmer there. Have you done the maple syrup already, or is that coming up?
Yes, I did put on the maple syrup a little bit. So I'll hold up the maple syrup that I have, and what I do is I typically put it on. I have it into a bowl, the maple syrup, and then I'll have almost like a honey stick, and I'll use the honey stick to coat the glass.
Nice.
Right? Sometimes even for kids, we do mocktail beverages. So it wouldn't be a Clamato Caesar, or maybe they're not interested into a virgin Caesar. They want something funky inside, but it needs to be like a dessert beverage for kids sometimes. It needs to be creative, colorful. You can even do I've done cascading sugar sidings on beverages, right? Wow. So you have a nice fancy dessert beverage with your whipped cream, chocolate swirl kind of deal, maybe even some shavings of nutmeg and maybe a little bit of caramel drizzle on there. And on the side, you can add a little bit of sweetener using that lime or even water. And it creates as a sticky adhesive for that, let's say, crushed candy canes, if you wanted, or crushed pop rockets.
Oh my goodness. And I'm sure all the parents at the wedding love you because their kids aren't going to sleep for 3 days.
Yes. Well, you know what? They end up trying it themselves and they come back for a second.
Oh my goodness. That's wild.
So now we're just going to add our vodka, now that we've rimmed it with the maple syrup, as well as the lime, and dipped it into our steak mix and our celery mix. Again, we're going to add in just a little bit of Worcestershire this time, not as much, just one dab. And one dab of Tabasco and not 2 shakes, or if you like extra spicy, throw in 5.
Oh my gosh.
And with this beverage, I typically don't throw in a pickle right into it. I actually throw a little bit of pickle juice.
Oh.
Right? So I throw a little bit of pickle juice. Oops.
Is a pickle a fairly common Caesar accompaniment?
Yes, but it doesn't necessarily have to be in there. Typically, I just like it because of the sweetness and the sourness as well. It sort of goes hand in hand.
Okay.
Like, I'm the kind of guy who eats sour candy till his tongue bleeds or goes raw.
Oh. You can have all the sour candy. I don't want any.
You don't want any?
Mm-mm.
Now that we've added the pickle juice as well as the alcohol, we're going to throw in our salt and pepper this time, as opposed to throwing it on top of the Clamato. The reason being, when I pour that Clamato on this one, because of that juice, that the pickle juice in there, I like it to stir in as opposed to just sitting on top of the Clamato. I like it to mix in with the brine. And our usual celery stick.
Is there a universe in which you don't put a celery stick in a Caesar? Or is that just always there regardless?
You don't necessarily have to. I enjoy the celery stick typically, even if I do let's say a pepperoni stick inside of the beverage. This is what I mean. They get real creative, right? Like
no, so this might be a silly question, but obviously, like, the pepperoni stick is for your meatitarians, but Clamato is also not vegetarian. So is there a universe in which you would do a vegetarian Caesar with just tomato juice, or is that kind of not a thing?
I would absolutely do a tomato juice and just make it almost like a Bloody Mary.
Okay.
Right? The Clamato juice is that clam juice that's inside of it. That makes it very particular, but like you said, we want to try to adhere to the vegetarians out there. And in order to do so, we would have to use just regular V8 juice.
Okay.
So now it's approximately been about, what, 15 minutes, I believe?
Yes, somewhere around there, 15 to 20.
15 to 20. So the oven should be done with your candied bacon. And as you can see, I've smushed my candied bacon in around a pickle. So when you get a bite out of the pickle, you also get a little bit of bite of the bacon. Here, I'll bring it over to the camera. That way you can see it.
You're blowing my mind here, Matthew.
Good, that's what we try to do. So as you can see here, I've taken the candied bacon. And if I take the candied bacon apart here, you can see the brown sugar has caramelized right on top of that bacon, adding a little bit of sweet texture as well as a little bit of a crunch.
Wow.
And that goes right on top of the beverage. And I typically would have a straw in there with them. And there's your maple smoked bacon.
That is highly impressive. Now, if you're bartending a wedding where Caesars are not necessarily the signature drink, but they are on the menu, are you able to arbitrarily come up with a percentage of people that would drink Caesars as their thing?
If you know that their Caesars are sorry, I had to. There was
of course.
In front of me.
Go for it.
With people having Caesars, I typically narrow my menus down for every event. So if a Caesar is a specialty drink and they need to have it, it's because a good chunk of clientele are going to want to have at least one. So I try to provide, or at least plan ahead, to have at least one Caesar for everybody to enjoy. and then tailor it back from there. Because typically after one Caesar, that almost is your appetizer. As we said before, you get a lot of snacks with it.
Yeah.
I in my line of work, I've seen a lot of people just enjoy the one Caesar and work their way on to maybe a wine with dinner, and then come back for an afternoon or an evening cocktail.
So generally, if you're thinking of offering Caesars, a good time to do it is during the cocktail hour, and then maybe phase them out for the dinner and the dance.
Absolutely. I would
Okay.
not recommend having Caesars around dancing time. God knows what can happen. You might spill something on your shirt or something when you're about to go and boogie.
Right. Fair enough. So let's maybe sort of segue then into talking about some other options for signature drinks that you've seen work well, or that you would recommend staying away from, or how is a couple who is struggling to nail down their signature drink, what would you recommend that they do? I know we've got Marissa on here. Shout out to Marissa. I know she's here specifically because she is having trouble coming up with an idea for a signature cocktail. What would you suggest to someone in that situation?
I would say make a list of something that is fun and interactive and meaningful to you. For example, I had a couple sit down with me, and his family were farmers. And in doing so, I suggested, why don't we do a honey kind of beverage? So we did a honey gin lemonade.
Ooh.
Yeah. Or sorry, honey gin fizz. Honey gin fizz. That's what it was.
Okay.
And for her, it was a basil lavender lemonade. That's what it was. So she enjoyed lavender flowers. That was her
Okay.
favorite. So we took lavender petals and we extracted it and made it into a syrup. And we were able to use that for her beverage.
That's
So
amazing.
I guess, I don't know. For me, it's like when I sit down with a client, I ask, like I said, what is something special to you? If you have a sweet tooth, maybe that's described. And the topper is a sweetener. But we try to create the cocktail syrups from scratch that reflect the people, so they can actually see the honey that's, or like the sweetness of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's
I hope
awesome.
that answers the question there. I kind of got sidetracked at explaining the story.
No, it's all good. So Marissa actually is saying she's looking for something fruity and she's trying to work within her bar menu package. So I assume, Marissa, what you mean by that is that you have like standard like bar rail available to you at the venue, and you're trying to find something that works with one of those standard liquors. If you want to clarify, that'd be great. But she says she's not a big drinker, so she's really struggling with it.
Because you're not being able to test out your experimental drinks.
Or it's not like Marissa sits down every night and has a gin fizz, or, you know, so yeah, so she says, yeah, standard list of alcohols and mixers. So is there something standard yet sort of elevated that you can recommend for a bride's cocktail?
Absolutely. If you have just a standard lineup of alcohol and mixes to go with your beverages, personally, the step up that needs to happen is going to be on the toppers, or even the way that you're going to execute your beverage. Right? So for example, if you wanted to do whiskey sours, right? That's a very easy one. And a lot of people enjoy whiskey sours. What I invested in, it was, I don't know if you've ever been in a restaurant, or like when you're at home and you have like those canisters and you're spraying the whipped cream out. I filled that with egg white. And I used the nitrogen cartridge to freeze the egg white, and I pour that onto the top of the beverage as opposed to cracking a fresh egg. So it keeps it quick. It keeps the same amount of steps, and it's simple. And yet customers love the effects, right? Because it's something new. It adds a different texture to it. And I throw on my little drops, or you can even do a little spritz on a design if you wanted to top it up. Maybe like a stencil cutout.
Ooh. Very cool. Now I'm thinking in terms of standard bar rail and standard mixers, and Marissa wants something fruity. I'm thinking, like, is there something maybe with cranberry juice or orange juice that you can recommend?
Tequila sunrises.
Okay.
Right, that's pretty standard. Tequila, who doesn't like tequila? Tequila is what I like to call it, because it always kills you later on. But that is another sweet one. Even adding sweet berries, like a fruit punch, into your cocktail mixes, that will add that kind of level of sweetness that you're looking for, and even maybe some sort of acidity to it with a fruit punch.
Okay. Now Seth is asking, what's the neatest signature drink you've ever seen? So I don't know what he means by neatest. I don't know whether
Neat.
it's most creative or most interesting.
Mm-hmm. Something that catches your eye.
Yeah, I mean, I know that I did a wedding last October where they had, one of them was the Fitzgerald,
Oh.
and one of them was the Dark and Stormy. And so one of them had ginger beer in it, which is a very distinctive thing that was very particular to the groom. And then the Fitzgerald had raspberry puree in it. So Marissa, I don't know, I can't come up with the actual ingredients off the top of my head, but it had raspberry puree and it was delicious. So I don't know if you're familiar with that, Matthew, but
Raspberry puree.
the Fitzgerald specifically. I don't.
Not the Fitzgerald drink. Not off the top of my head, but definitely the Dark and Stormy is an easy one, right? That's a nice little bit of rum and ginger beer.
Yeah. And so Seth is saying interesting. He means what's the most interesting signature drink you've ever seen?
The most interesting. I gotta say it was traveling in and around Toronto, down in the distillery district. I had the luxury of joining Nickel 9 Distillery, or not Nickel 9, Northern Temple, right? So Northern Temple created a beverage with their vodka, and they actually ended up sprinkling a little bit of cinnamon on there. And the cinnamon, they ignited it, and when it ignited, the cinnamon almost acted as sparklers on top of the beverage.
Mm-hmm.
So that was very inquisitive for me because I had never experienced anything like that. It was almost like a magician show, right?
Yeah, and that's something too that I think if you have the bartending staff and they have the bandwidth to handle it, those interactive, almost like show-stopping beverages can be really interesting. I've seen signature drinks done with like smoked sage. Was it smoked sage? Something that literally gets lit on fire and it smokes, and then they put it into this drink, and I don't know what it was, but you know, that's where the whole flair bartending thing kind of is interesting. It's like a show and entertainment, and you get a drink at the end of it. So yeah, I think though, if you're interested in going that route, you absolutely have to make sure that you have the staff who have the skills to handle it. You can't bring in, you know, your friends Joe and Susie from high school who bartended at the local bar and grill for, you know, their college years, and then throw these crazy labor-intensive, skill-requiring signature drinks at them. So, so I think there are, from my perspective, there are a couple of ways to handle signature drink creation. And one of them is what we were just talking about, where you hopefully have someone like Matthew on your team who's going to sit down with you and say, well, what do you like? What in your life do you like? That lavender thing really just struck me because, I mean, she likes lavender flowers, and then you're all of a sudden making a homemade lavender syrup. Like, hello, that's amazing. So I think that you can approach it by, what do I really like? What do I enjoy sitting down and drinking on a Friday evening after a long week of work? I think you can also approach it from just a purely color coordinated standpoint. I mean, if your wedding color is blush, maybe, I mean, I'm drinking a pink grapefruit gin fizz right now. That's a pretty pink drink, and I threw a rosemary sprig from my garden in it, and look how elegant I am. So choosing something that matches your colors is another option. Choosing something that's reminiscent of you as a couple. So maybe you spent some time in France and you want to, lean towards a drink that's popular in France, or that is, representative of you as a couple or your likes and dislikes. So I don't know whether you have anything else to add to that, Matthew.
If I'm ever going to be making a cocktail, I try to keep it as simple as I can, because I know not everyone is the exact same when I'm talking about staff. So if you can keep it simple and keep it replicated and keep it so that everyone can comprehend it, it becomes a lot smoother, not for just the staff, but even for the guests. Your guests get their drinks faster. It becomes a drink that is supposed to taste the same throughout the night and not vary from glass to glass.
Yeah. And so speaking of having staff that's able to replicate the same thing time and time again and keeping it simple for staff to produce, Marissa is saying, have we found most venues who supply bartenders are able to accommodate those types of creative and labor-intensive beverages? She doesn't think they get to meet their bartenders in advance. And that is definitely the case when you're working with an event center or a hotel or a golf course. I mean, in a lot of cases, their bartenders are fairly run-of-the-mill. They have their training, they have maybe a year or two of experience, but they're certainly not specialists in the way that Matthew is talking about, creating drinks that really cater to your likes and dislikes and creating those individualized, custom and homemade elements. So I think in the case where you're dealing with an event venue, keeping it simple is probably absolutely actually going to be the key. The most adventurous I would probably ask for is maybe, hey, can you do this drink that has your standard liquor and your standard mix and maybe throw in some fruit puree? And to be honest, one of my favorite drinks that's super simple is a Bellini. I am a huge fan of bubbly, and you throw some fruit puree into some champagne and you magically have this Bellini. And you could offer several different types. You could offer a peach Bellini and a strawberry and a raspberry Bellini. And it's so simple. It's just, hey, can you add these 3 fruit purees? I can't speak. Maybe it's the gin. These 3 fruit purees onto the bar. I mean, the venue probably will upcharge you a little bit, but it's not like it's something that is impossible for a run-of-the-mill bartender to create. So from my perspective, coming up with something super simple like that, or something really standard, like Matthew mentioned, the tequila sunrise, when I think fruity, I kind of get transported back to my college days, and I tend to think of like cranberry juice and Malibu rum, which is like it's the quintessential college drink, but it's so good.
It is. It's tasty.
Yeah. So, I mean, and Marissa, I think that would match your colors too. So Chrissy likes the Bellini idea.
There you go.
So I think that, that's something that I have a staycation booked for next weekend. I think I might just have to Bellini it up.
Looks like you got a Malibu there.
Yeah, Marissa is saying that's one of the only drinks she does like, Malibu with cranberry and OJ and white freezy. Well, I mean, go for it, Marissa. If that's something that you enjoy, that's the reason to have a signature drink, if you ask me. I mean,
Preach it.
There are no wedding prizes for like having a signature drink or not. It's not like the judges are going to say, oh, she didn't have a signature drink, we're docking her points. If you feel strongly that you want to do it and there's something that you like, that seems pretty natural to me. Sorry, I just jumped all over you, Matthew. You were going to say something.
No, I was saying preach, because that was perfect. When you find a drink that is something that you enjoy, you're going to be more I can't even speak. you're going to adamant about the beverage, right? You're going to want to encourage others to try that beverage, and you're going to put more of an effort into that beverage because it's something that you cherish.
Yeah. Now help me out here. White freezy. What's in a white freezy?
Oh, I'd have to dust off the book for that one. That's a little while ago.
Okay, Marissa, hook me up in the chat here. I don't know what a white freezy is. I mean, I know what a white freezy tastes like from when I was 8, but
yeah,
what's in the drink? I pretty much stick fairly close to my wine and beer most days. So signature drinks are definitely something that I enjoy trying at weddings because it's interesting, and I always think that's a little bit of an insight into the couple, but I tend to stick normally fairly close to my wine. Banana liqueur, raspberry sourpuss, and Sprite. Ah, okay. You know what? Randomly, I think I have all those things in my liquor cabinet. I might have to try that. It's a Friday night party, folks. Yeah, so I mean, I think that Matthew has given us some really incredible ideas here. And I think that if you are working with a bartending service or a venue that is willing to accommodate some creativity, it really gives you the license to bring yourself into your bar offerings, which is something that I always love. Anything interactive or personal is going to score big points in my book. So any extra little tidbits or anything else to add there, Matthew, about signature drinks in general?
Well, feel free to always inquire and question. You can always comment to Handlebars on our website, handlebarsbartending.ca, or reach out on our Instagram, Handlebars Bartending, and we'll help guide you along the process and help you with trial and errors. And we also are going to be supplying people with homemade cocktail syrups, so like a raspberry syrup. So maybe if that's something that could be entered into your arsenal when creating a drink, to create a new lineup of beverages for your own events, feel free to reach out and we can collaborate.
I love that. That's amazing. So you just mentioned a couple of places where people can find you. So if people are looking for bartending services for the near future or for next year, when hopefully things have gone slightly back to normal, is the best place to contact you through your website?
Website or my phone number is 647-801-7592. My contacts are listed on the website, which is handlebarsbartending.ca there. I don't know if, it's backwards because it's a camera.
No, it's silly. All good. All good. We can see it.
But that is one of the best ways to reach out, and I will get back to you as soon as I can, or some of our representatives will get back to you as soon as we can, and we can help you out with whatever your inquiries are.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. This has been a ton of fun. I really enjoyed hanging out with you on my Friday night, and I appreciate you being here and sharing your expertise and creative ideas. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in tonight and throughout the week. It has been, I'm not going to lie, exhausting, but a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed talking about all the ways that I can possibly think of to help you to organize your bar with less stress, to make your bar creative and interactive and enjoyable for your guests and yourselves. So hopefully you've really enjoyed the Bar Bash. I would love it if you would, just hit up our Facebook page and click that blue like button at the top, write us a review, shoot us a message if you have questions. I'm always available, and I am more than happy to talk about anything wedding related, whether it has to do with your bar or your dress or, whatever it is. I love weddings. I'm all about that and all about helping you. So thank you so much for being here. Matthew, you're amazing. I can't wait to work with you in the near future. And have an amazing weekend.
Well, thank you for having us, and thank you for putting this event together and making it accessible for so many people.
Of course. All right, everybody take care, enjoy responsibly, and I'll catch you later.
Take care.
Bye.